Good evening, I'm Donnie Deutsch, and I am really thrilled to be here. There are exactly 542 days until the 2020 presidential election. And tonight, the big stories of this week and next. Hey, Don, it's the economy, stupid. Can the president ever stay on message about a booming economy? And will his spat with China cost him political points? I'll talk to Mad Money's Jim Cramer about those issues and what top CEOs really think of the president. Constitutional crisis. What's the Democrats' playbook for dealing with a lawless president? Lots to cover, and this is Saturday Night Politics. First, a little about me. As a 30-year branding and marketing veteran to Fortune 50 companies, a consultant presidential and DNC campaigns, and former, keyword is former, business associate and friend of POTUS for 20 years, I'm here to shed some strategic light during those next 542 days. We're going to bring in some thought leaders and influencers from outside of politics, in addition to some of your favorite political faces, to break down the key strategic questions and challenges as we head into 2020. We've got an amazing group. Speaking of familiar faces, I take a little extra time for introductions. To my left is the great Nicolle Wallace. Now, you know Nicolle, obviously, host of Deadline White House, former comms director of the Bush White House. I think she has become one of the most political voices of our time. People stop me on the street. I love, they don't say hi, Donnie. I love Nicolle. I love Nicolle. Is she as nice as she seems? And I say yes. What you also don't understand about Nicolle, why she is so smart, every minute, so who are you talking to? Oh, I just got off the phone with W. I just got off the phone with the Attorney General. The most plugged in, but you break it down in such a real way. And I think you are truly the most beloved host on this network. And the reason you're here, because you're a big time, because you're a friend, and you want to come on and help me out. And I love you and appreciate that.
It's my 2-year anniversary this week.
Is it really?
And I never would have had a first show if you weren't one of my friends and champions. So
that's not true.
Really cool.
That's not
to be
true.
Here
but thank you. It really personally means a lot to me. You as nice as she seems, she's even nicer. As opposed to Rick Stengel. The reason Stengel's here, what people don't know, you've got what I call the Buttigieg resume. Okay, Rhodes Scholar, Princeton graduate, obviously former managing editor of Time for 7 years, where they won Magazine of the Year, former State Department official, and you worked with Mandela on his autobiography. I mean, that's kind of that's Buttigieg type stuff.
Let's talk about the real reason you have me here.
What is that? See if you get it.
That I'm older than you.
Oh, and because you always comment on my shoes. Okay, Don Galloway, you are the founder of the National Voter Protection Action Fund. I saw you on Matthew's show.
Yeah.
I said, this guy's sharp. I love that you come from Missouri politics. We need that Midwestern thing. You're an attorney. We've got a lot of legal stuff to talk about tonight, so I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you for having me, man. Hey, listen, I'm a kid from Matthews Dickey Boys Club sitting here with Nicolle Wallace and Rhodes Scholar. What a time.
That's what I feel. Okay, and as a tip of my hat to my former friend Donald Trump, we have built a wall. Yes, a wall, the Saturday Night Wall, the political wall. We're going to go through the building blocks of that wall throughout the show as a roadmap to wrap up the week's top stories. Our first topic. Hey, Don, it's the economy, stupid. Trump usually can't stay on message, and remember that a thriving economy is an incumbent's best friend. If he ever does stay on message, will the Dems have the right counterpunch?
Every time a foreign leader, a president, a prime minister, a king, a queen, a dictator, we got some of them too. Every time they come into the office, they say, congratulations on what you've done for this economy. It's the hottest on earth.
Greatest show on earth. Nicolle, let me start with you. The Dems are, I feel from they're nervous that once he will get a message at some point. But I have a theory that the Dems do have a good punchback, that there are two economies. Totally. And the way to do it is you say, that's your economy. Yes, with 3.6 unemployment, lowest in 50 years, GDP at 3%. Our economy, a handful of facts. 3 in 10 Americans don't think they're financially healthy. The tax cuts obviously help the rich. Real wage growth is basically flat and the same as 50 years ago. Half the workers in this country earn under $31,000 a year. The minimum wage is still $750. There are 500,000 healthcare bankruptcies a year. The farmers, nobody's participating in the stock market. How do the Dems frame that to really, really say, no, not our economy?
So Joe Biden's first rally was in Pittsburgh, and I think he got this part of it right. And obviously, it's a message that any one of them could probably deliver, but he did it the most effectively, as far as I've seen, on the trail. So he said to this loud, raucous rally, he said, the stock market is booming. They didn't cheer, but they had to absorb that because obviously that's I guess to Donald Trump's credit. And then he said, "Do you feel it?" The room exploded.
Right.
I mean, you know, as far as a former political messenger, the best, most salient messages are the ones that are true. And that's the truest thing you can say about this economy. Is the stock market booming? You betcha. Do you feel it? Most people don't.
So Rick, that's one framing. Is there one of those issues I mentioned that to you it's more of a hot button than others?
You know, the one to me that's a hot button is social mobility. America was once the land of social mobility. People could move up in classes. They aspired to be someone like Donald Trump. Social mobility is at a 50-year low in America. Even if the stock market is booming, the stock market is not the economy. This discrepancy between the haves and the have-nots is getting wider. So when Biden says that and the people in the audience go, the stock market is booming, and they cheer, that's because it doesn't affect them, doesn't impinge on them, and because people are not able to move up the ladder, which is the thing that truly made America great, and that's not happening now.
You can tell which one of us wrote political speeches and which one of us has
the Rhodes Scholar?
advanced degrees.
So, Don, it's interesting. I think going back to 18, looking at 20, it's not the economy, stupid, because, by the way, the economy was roaring at 18. Now it's not a presidential election. It's healthcare, stupid. And I don't think you can separate healthcare and the economy anymore. They are one and the same to a big chunk of this country.
You absolutely can't. And you see the president with these continuously duplicitous statements. He goes out and says, we will be the party of healthcare. We will protect pre-existing conditions. Believe me. Whenever he says believe me, you know, we should be on alert. And last week, they filed bills in the Senate to completely gut what is the remainder of Obamacare, which is primarily pre-existing condition coverage. But to Rick's point, the average African-American household in Boston, I think it came out in a first quarter report, is worth $8. So I just have to point out that there is a dramatic disparity between families of color, particularly in high-priced urban areas in terms of net worth and how we are experiencing this economy and what the president says is booming. But even if you want to take it again to the corporate macro level, let's be very clear. This president has thrown the economy into dramatic uncertainty with these tariffs that have just absolutely no connection with market realities and is pushing them again 18 months after a series of the last tariffs. We import a lot of goods from China, and this is not the way to make an economic statement to push us forward.
Tariffs, what people need to understand is all of a sudden now when you walk into Walmart, it's an extra $100.
Right.
And it could cost 300,000 jobs. You know, Rick, Trump, not to him, it's just,
yes,
let's do this.
I mean, if people just realize tariff means a tax on you, they're putting increased cost on the manufacturer. We buy billions and billions and billions of dollars more products from China than China buys from us. A tariff on their products means you're paying more for everything.
All right.
And I'm going to take the job of dumbing down everything Rick said.
No. Don't steal my credentials.
But in terms of how that affects, I mean, it disproportionately affects the middle class and low income people.
Right.
When stuff becomes more expensive at Walmart,
it's regressive.
to be fair, it doesn't affect us. It disproportionately affects middle class and low income families.
All right, let's
And
get back.
companies will
we got to
not
move
eat
on.
that tax.
I want to get back to the wall. We got to go to the wall.
Sure, let's
We
go.
gotta- I like saying my wall announcement. Trump's tax troubles. 10 years of old Trump tax returns show he was truly America's biggest loser to the tune of $1 billion over just a decade. The New York AG's new subpoena for his state returns might reveal some more recent and damaging tax news for Trump. Okay, how do the Dems make the tax stuff stick? First of all, Rick, as far as the state, if you get the state, you see what's going on in federal. They mirror each other. But there's a lot to pick at there. Is it that he's a fraud? Is it that he pays no taxes? Is it that there's $50 million of interest income that nobody knows where that came from? Once again, so much of what I always want to do on the show is how do we twist it back to the voter? How does that matter to a voter?
Well, it matters. I'm trying to be more general.
No. We have roles here, okay? Midwest attorney, Rhodes Scholar, really smart, dumbed down.
So he's
okay?
trying to sell himself as this fantastic entrepreneurial businessman. The New York Times has been exceptional in the reporting that they've done. Not only did he lose $1 billion over those 10 years, the story they did last year where he inherited the equivalent of $400 million from his father. If he'd put that in just an index fund in the stock market, he would be far wealthier than he is now. So his whole persona is a lie in terms of how he's selling himself to voters. That's what this story says in a general way.
But Don, how about that a lot of his voters go, yeah, he beats the system. He's smart. There's this weird dynamic with him with some very, very economically challenged people that the very people he's exploiting somehow celebrate him. It's a bizarre psychological twist.
There is a fine line in this country between tax avoidance and tax evasion. And to some degree, all of us try to participate in some degree of tax avoidance. We try to lessen our tax burden every year. We pay accountants to do that. But the fundamental thing about this story is that it flies in the face of him being a business success. However, that doesn't matter to the Midwestern voter, to the Rust Belt voter. What matters to them is that he will protect against the otherism of America, the browning, the women taking power. As long as he bashes Ilhan Omar and AOC on Twitter once a month or however much they need, they don't care that he's been a dramatic business failure. You all knew this. We just talked about it for a long time. It's not a secret or rocket science to see that this guy has been a dramatic business failure. But as long as he is willing to oppress certain folks that these people in the Midwest think are encroaching upon their territory, they'll be okay.
Nicole, obviously, day in, day out, we're following Mueller, we're following Russia. I think the real dirty gem in there is the Russian money that's going to come out. Because the big question always was, other than Deutsche Bank, where's he getting his money from? That's when it becomes black and white.
It's that the money's dirty. I think it's also, this may be a little genderish, if it makes you squirm, I'm sorry. Donald Trump is a man obsessed with the size of his hands. Turns out, if one thing's fake, and let me just, the girl in the bar, if your hair's fake, and your hand size is something that gets under your skin, and your wealth turns out to be fake, you are taking up residence inside Donald Trump's head in a way that could be devastating, that has nothing to do with whether or not you give to charity. It has nothing to do with where the money came from. It's something, Donald Trump's wealth is as primal as the time and energy he spends for some reason on his hairdo, the time and energy he spends defending the size and performance of his hands, as he did in that debate during the primaries with Marco Rubio. This stuff, it's ridiculous and it's uncomfortable, but it matters to him. And if I'm a Democratic strategist, I want to understand what matters to him. The size of things matters to him.
You know who understands that is Pelosi, where she talks about the size. Well, she really gets it. Speaking of which, I'm supposed to read it differently. Pelosi's winning Trump card. There's one firm, calm Democratic voice that seems to rise above all others in strength and wisdom, and one for which the president has no big answer. Could that voice be the Dems' quest for the White House in 2020? Rick, one of the challenges, and I'm going to get to this in my editorial later, is that the Democrats have one voice. I mean, the Republicans have one voice. It's a vile voice, but it's consistent. Now you've got 20 voices. I see for the first time in a presidential election I can remember that there is an overarching voice to use. She is so pitch perfect in her calm, in her strength. Trump does not punch back at her. Her message about impeachment is right. She is right on. And to me, as much as she can be front and center as the anti-Trump, that's a real great kind of running mate to who's ever running.
I'd say she's been surfing the Trump zeitgeist better than anybody. She has been pitch perfect, and it does help the Democratic candidates because she takes a lot of flack, and she can absorb that while they have a little bit more of a free rein, which would be a good thing.
Don, what was interesting is that, Trump, you never get to see Trump crisply lose because he comes from the Roy Cohn school of even when I lose, I won. That's what he was taught.
That's right.
In the shutdown, that was a KO. That was, she nailed him. She made it his shutdown. He lost big L. And I think that was a real turn for the American people to say, hey, she's got the kind of bobbing and weaving that we might need.
She does, and I'd like to juxtapose her with her counterpart in the Senate. Who is the minority leader of the House right now? You don't know. The average American doesn't know it's Kevin McCarthy. And the parallel here is that Chuck Schumer is not as powerful as a voice as Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell is completely dominating that narrative in the Senate in a way that Chuck Schumer has really been kind of relegated to not being a stronger voice. Nancy Pelosi is the voice, the unifying voice of the Democratic Party. When she stepped out and put those shades on in that beautiful orange coat, a new boss arrived in town, and she's dominating.
Nicole, real quick, here's what she also gets. The 40 districts the Dems won were down the middle districts. They weren't AOC's districts. And she comes right out and says it. She's not afraid of that. Yet she's keeping them all together, but she reminds the party, hey, kids, literally and figuratively, that's not the answer, winning a district in the Bronx. The answer is the suburban districts we took back last time.
I think that's right. I think Mommy, if you look around the corner, I agree with everything that's been said about her. I think she's been remarkable. I think her challenge as 2020 heats up is that she's got the progressive side of the Democratic base would like to see the president impeached.
Well, once again, I'm going to say it for the last time. Step away from impeachment. That's what he wants. Do not give it to him.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.